also notice I'm wearing a new pair of jeans, and I noticed that the fly slowly goes down throughout the day. So if I'm flashing you guys at some point, if you could wave your arms and let me know, I'd really appreciate that. I'm like super paranoid about it. Anyways, okay, so let's talk about StyleSeat. This is my company. Started in 2011. I'll give you a quick overview about it so you know a little bit about kind of what we're working with, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the interesting lessons that I've learned along the way. So today, StyleSeat is the largest marketplace, the largest destination to discover, book, and pay for beauty and wellness appointments. So we're a marketplace, which means we do two things, essentially. On the supply side, we work with beauty professionals, right? So hairstylists, makeup artists, nail professionals, estheticians. If you're a guy, you might not know too much about a lot of these types of professionals, but the average woman gets 55 services done with 13 different people over the course of a year. So she's getting her hair cut with one person, she's getting every 6 weeks, her hair colored with another person every 6 weeks, a manicure probably once every week or two, pedicure around once a month, she's getting waxing every 6 to 8 weeks in lots of different places, she's getting her eyebrows done, her eyelashes done, there's a lot of things that are happening, facials, etc. And the challenge is that you can either go to a review site to kind of get the scoop on a salon or spa and comb through 6 reviews and try and figure out the best people for you. You can ask a friend. Both of those things are very hit or miss. And really on the supply side, the biggest issue is that these beauty professionals do not have an easy way to run their business. So when I started the company back in 2011, about 80% of professionals were employees. And 20% were independent contractors. Today, 70% of these professionals are independent contractors. And they've become independent because they discovered Facebook, Instagram, their smartphone, and ultimately StyleSeat, which is this awesome tool which we'll talk about. But their biggest challenge is they've become independent, which means now they don't have to give a salon or spa 50% of all of their revenue to run their business because they're doing that themselves. The challenge is that these beauty professionals are artists. They're passionate about their work. They're passionate about working with consumers and clients and strangers and working with them and having conversations with them. They're not passionate about client acquisition, retention, marketing, online booking, scheduling, referral programs, etc. And so what StyleSeat does is we do all of these things for them. We run their business for free. We grow their revenue an average of 70% in the first 15 months with this awesome turnkey solution where you download an app, you upload all of your clients from your phone, you suck them in, you suck in your schedule, and all of a sudden you have this business that will almost double in the next year using our platform that runs their business for them automatically. And then on the consumer side, as I mentioned before, discovery is really hard, finding and booking people is really hard, and in a world where today I can get a car on my phone, my dry cleaning is done and delivered at my door, my groceries are delivered, I don't want to call around and book appointments, right? So these are the problems that we solve. We do both. And as you can see, this is what our search experience looks like on the mobile phone. So you can discover, book, and pay. It's pretty simple. We are in 82% of U.S. cities. We're in 16,000 cities across the U.S., and we've grown entirely organically. So this has all happened on its own. And a couple of quick numbers. We have 420,000 beauty professionals, 7 million clients. We've powered 50 million appointments, and we've booked $3 billion across our platform, all organically. So a couple of quick learnings, right? Before I started StyleSeat, I was completely unqualified to start a business. I had never run a business before. I'd run a P&L in a small department, but I'd worked in product for maybe a year or two. So I'd worked with engineers before, but I had never run an app. I didn't have a CS degree. I didn't go to Harvard or Stanford. And these things, because they were such stereotypes of sort of requirements to start a company as a founder, really tripped me up. I sat on the idea for StyleSeat for 2 years, and every time I'd want to start it, I was obsessed with this, right? Every time I'd want to think about starting the company, maybe I should start planning over the weekend or nights, during nights after I was working, I would have all these reasons not to, right? You can't do it because of this. I can't do it because of this. And I'd spend all of my energy thinking about all the no's. But the reality is after I started the company and I started to get going, it's funny because you see peers alongside you that start companies at the same time, and they did go to Harvard and Stanford. They do have those perfect credentials. And I would consider myself to be inferior to them, right, along the way, or like, oh no, they're so much more qualified. They're so much better than me at the outset. And I would find that slowly and slowly those companies wouldn't exist after a year or 2 years. It's not to say that they weren't qualified, right? And maybe they went off and started other companies that were great. But what I realized is the stereotypes that I had put in front of myself, the barriers that I put in front of myself weren't actually the right things. They didn't actually matter. The things that actually mattered in starting a company are these words that I put up on here. Being tenacious. Starting a company and running a company means that you are going to be told no 100,000 times at least, right? Investors are going to say no, it's a terrible idea. You'll hear that 700 times when you're fundraising. People won't want to be your co-founder. Engineers won't want to work with you. Designers won't be ready to work with you. You'll be told from so many advisors, like, you shouldn't do this, you're not qualified, it's a horrible market, stylists will never use technology. It's basically no, 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 all day, every day. The janitor will tell you, something's broken, you got to go fix that. And so waking up every single day and saying, I only need one yes, and all I have to do is get one yes today, and that tenacity and that sort of putting your blinders on and pushing forward is a common characteristic in so many founders that I know. And it's something that totally, especially in the beginning when you do it, people are like, you're nuts, you're not hearing all of the no's, and you just have to ignore them, and you have to be as tenacious as possible. I put resiliency up here because when you're told all these no's all day, every day, you have to pick yourself up and just keep going and lean into the pain. I remember early on when we were fundraising for the company, I think we'd raised a seed round from incredible people, some of the people that he mentioned earlier. And I was looking to raise a second amount of seed funding, and we weren't, we'd been told no, and we didn't have a lot of money in the bank, and it looked like the company was maybe not going to make it. And we were told by a VC partner to fly out to where his office was, which is in the middle of the country, and to go pitch his firm. We went in, we pitched. I thought that my pitch that I had brought was great. He had worked at a similar company before. He's like, I've already told, the partners, they're totally in. This is going to be a slam dunk. And we completely flopped when we went into the meeting because the partners were like, give me, all the cohort data. They asked for all these things that we just didn't have. And at the time, I left the meeting, and this was after, so many meetings of fundraising. And I left the meeting, and I walked 2 blocks down the street, and all of a sudden everything hit me. It was like, we have so much pressure, we have so many things to do, the stylists love it, the product's awesome, and I can't fundraise, I'm a terrible founder. And I laid down on the ground in the middle of a busy street, and I burst into tears. I was on the concrete cement, and I'm just crying. And after 30 seconds pass, I open my eyes, and I look up, and my founder is standing over me, and he's like, are you done? And I was like, yes. I think so. I'm crying. He's like, okay, well, I'm going to give you 1 more minute to compose yourself. We're going to go to a bar. We're going to have 3 beers. And then we're going to figure this out. We're going to solve the problem. And it's moments like that people don't really talk about. And it really bothers me that people don't talk about it, because it would be easy for me to stand up here and say, we've raised $40 million and we've powered $3 billion in bookings. And 30% of the market is using our product. And that's all really great and exciting. But it's these moments that sort of are the difference between the people that make it and the people that sort of give up and kind of move on. One of the really important, I'd say most essential conversations I had with my founder in the beginning, my co-founder Dan, was to tell him what I wanted to get out of this business and to make sure that our intentions are aligned, right? Because if you have one founder that just wants to sell for $20 million in 18 months, that is a very different process and intention and way he's going to run the business than someone who's going for the billion-dollar idea. Right? So I sort of told him I would love to have an outcome where I have a little bit of freedom. If I didn't have to work for even 6 months, that would be so exciting and thrilling and allow me to be able to make long-term decisions and sort of decide what I wanted to do with my life. I also want to prove that I can do it. So I want this company to get to a certain amount of scale. And we talked about what that meant in terms of financials and in terms of scale. I also told him I'm going to give up years of my life for this. You have me dedicated. We bootstrapped the company for the first year and a half. We did not take weekends for that first year and a half. He and I were in his living room, and then we were in this other dude's house for probably the better part of a year, working every single day, and that's what I dedicated to him, and he was right on board with me. It doesn't necessarily work if one person is there working 100% of the time and another person takes weekends or doesn't have that same level of commitment, and that isn't clear in the beginning. I used all of my savings. I racked up all my credit cards. I didn't see my friends for a long period of time because this was important to me, but this is what I was willing to give. It was important to me to raise capital. I believed in the opportunity for the business, and I wasn't going to bootstrap forever, and I made that very clear to him, like, we are going to go raise, and so that's going to be part of our process. I think it was also really important for us that I plan. I'm a planner. I live in Excel. That's how I understand the world. And so I was very clear with him. I sat down before I had a product, before I had a co-founder, before I had any users or any money or anything like that. I mapped out the life of the company. Here's what the company is going to look like. Here's the value that I want it to be at the end of it. Here's all the rounds we're going to raise, and here are the milestones and major things that I want to hit in order to get to the next phase. That's important for me because in the beginning of the process, you've got all these ideas and you're filled with passion. And the hardest thing about starting a company is taking all of those ideas and the craziness and putting it into something that is actionable and helps you move forward. And so for me, mapping it all out, and every time I'd have an idea, I'd put it on that roadmap, on that sort of timeline of the business. It allowed me to get really clear and take something that seemed totally daunting. I want to start a $100 million company, right? Or whatever it is for you. A $20 million company, a $10 million company, whatever. I want to start that. That sounds totally daunting and overwhelming. But saying, okay, I want to do that. Here's the 5 things I need to do to get there, and here's the first one. And if I wake up today and I make progress on the first one, then I did a good job. And chopping it down into something that's very bite-sized and actionable. That was a really important lesson for me when I started the business. So that way you know what your major milestones are, you know what your next step is, and then understand that this will all 100% change and just be okay with that. You can't predict the future no matter how much you plan, and you just have to embrace that. Know that there are pros and cons to taking investment, right? The major pro is that you get to move faster. You get to hire the people to build the growth, to build the product, to launch faster, to get that minimum viable product or minimum crappy product, whatever you said before. You can get it out. There are cons to raising money, and raising money isn't for everyone. People don't talk about the cons a whole lot. The cons are that you have to move faster. You don't get the opportunity to build the product as much as you want to build. You want to have more conversations with customers. You want to really make sure it's a little bit more finessed, or you want to build it out more. You don't necessarily have the luxury of doing it, right? You have less control. So there's another person at the table when you're making major decisions about the company. It's not just you and your co-founder. Your investors or your board is a part of that conversation too, which can be super annoying to some people. You have less flexibility. You have to create a plan and relatively commit to it. If you want to scrap everything and you want to start a mobile app instead, or a gaming company, you cannot do that. You have a fiduciary responsibility, so that can be annoying. And also, it's not on your timeline, right? So investors have needs, they have capital needs. They're investing, and there's a certain period of time by which their patience sort of wanes, and you have to relieve that pressure in the company, right? So knowing that that pressure is going to be there and being okay with that is important. If it's not, then investment becomes less desirable. Another important lesson, I talk to a lot of founders. So I've been an advisor for the TL 20 Under 20. I've advised Stanford Business School and have a lot of conversations with founders, I should say. Oftentimes founders will come to me and say, oh yeah, I'm raising. Yeah, I've had a conversation last week, and I'm going to have a conversation in 2 weeks, and I've got a couple firms that are interested. They're super interested. You're either fundraising or you're not. There is no yeah, I'm sort of raising. And I think that's a really important distinction, because investors will tell you, they'll make it seem like you're raising, or they'll make it seem like you're going through the process when you're actually not. The biggest deal killer of fundraising deals is time, right? And so just know, if you're not ready to raise, or if you think you're ready to raise in 2 or 3 weeks, tell people you are not raising. You can have conversations. You can give them a little bit of information, but don't give them the full pitch if you're not officially raising, because then they get all the goodies, they get all the information about your business, but they don't actually have to do anything with it. And because they don't have that time pressure, they don't have that pressure from other investors to move the process forward, they sort of have all the power, and that can make a deal getting done really difficult. So know when you're going to raise, pick a date, and then line up as many meetings as you can with as many investors as you can within that process. You're always incentivized to, even if your company's doing incredibly well, to get as many meetings packed in with the folks that you really want to work with, so that when you talk to one investor and they talk to another investor, someone goes, oh, have you heard of this company? And that second investor goes, oh, wait, I have a meeting with her or him in 2 days. oh, okay, well, let me know how it goes. And then you start to get this really cool buzz that happens, and you get this momentum that naturally happens as a part of that process. So it's a lesson that I think you don't learn until you go through the process, but it's incredibly important. Know that you're going to be bad, you're going to suck. Investing is hard, and pitching and fundraising is only something that you can learn to do when you go through the process. That stopped me. I actually probably could have fundraised or should have raised maybe 6 months before we did. Bootstrapping for a year and a half is a long time. I didn't have any money going into the process, so it was like incredibly hard living. But I was too scared to start the process. And the reality is because I knew that I was bad, and I would start to pitch, and I'm like, I'm so bad at this. Just lean into how bad you are. Pick a couple first pancakes, pick firms or people that you don't necessarily want to take money from to sort of try it out. You're going to be really bad, but get better really quickly, because it's the only way you can learn is by doing. This is overly vague, but I think is incredibly important. Work with the best people you can possibly work with. This doesn't have to mean that they've run the biggest companies or they're the fanciest people. It's the best people that you can work with for that time. So I worked with some advisors really early on that were incredibly amazing. They help you do things 10 times faster than you could and 10 times better than you could naturally. So whether that's your advisory team, the team that you hire, or the investors that you work with, make sure you love your investors early on. Make sure that they're investing in you and they love you and they believe in you. Hopefully they've already had a little bit of liquidity. They're not depending on you for them to make that fund back. But they love your product. And you can go and you can have a drink with them and it's awesome. If it's a little awkward and weird, it's always going to be awkward and weird. And then that can make things tricky later on. So pick people you love and that are super smart and are invested in your success. One of the other challenges that I see when talking to early stage companies is that they are either overly vague and then they've got a team that's sort of not coordinated and running around, or they're too specific and they're kind of harping on their team every day, all day, and basically like hovering over them like while they're executing. The key with being a good leader and being a good founder is being extremely clear, but also leaving enough room for people to really feel like they own the solution. So one of the critical parts of this is to make sure that as you're talking about the company and as you're hiring people, you're very clear about why you're doing what you're doing, not necessarily the what. So for example, if I was talking about the what, I could say, hey, hairstylist, StyleSeat is awesome business tools. We are this incredible business platform. We'll help you grow your business. It's amazing. Sign up. Nah, they kind of go, okay. But if we said, StyleSeat believes that people should be able to do what they love and to make a better living for it. And because we believe that, we've created this awesome tool that's really cool business tools. It'll make your business more efficient. It'll help you grow. That switch in pitch for us was the difference between technology, like not that interesting, to I love my business too. I think that I should be able to do what I love and become more successful. Yeah, I'm totally amenable to that. I'm open to that. And when that becomes your pitch and your foundation for talking to customers and for hiring people, right? Not very many people at StyleSeat really care about the beauty industry, but we love entrepreneurs. We want them to be more successful. We live and breathe their success. That is the difference between hiring people that want to build software and kind of check in and check out versus people that bleed for the success of your customers, because that is something that is core and important to them. Be sure to have a very clear vision, but then also to show metrics that support that vision. It's talked about in the presentation before this as well, really well. OKRs are incredible, right? So it's basically chopping the vision into concepts and then into numbers that execute against that concept. And then again, talking about agency and autonomy. So make sure that you have great leaders at your team, or if you are too small and you don't really have leaders or layers yet, that you have really great mentors that your team can talk to help guide them and to execute, but also there's clear measurements they can execute and be successful. And then another thing that I think is really important as you start to scale and you grow your company is to move from being the captain of the ship, where you're telling people what to do, you're pulling the ropes, you're telling people where to go, to being the architect of the ship. And what that means is spending more time thinking about how can I upgrade a certain operating system? How can I upgrade the team structure? So I'm not telling people what to do because the team structure is sort of broken. I'm thinking about the systems and structures that we can change so that everyone naturally starts to work a little bit better. changing the numbers that we're focusing on, because the numbers that we're running towards are not the right numbers. And so rather than sort of telling people that, it's about changing the direction, changing the structure of the way the ship is built so that every single piece of that ship is moving more efficiently and moving quicker in the right direction. And then the last thing is to have fun. It is super hard to start a company. It is super hard to run a company. Fundraising's hard, operating's hard, executing's hard, running a team is hard, but it's also the best experience ever. It's so much fun and it's so fulfilling and it's the best thing that I've ever done. So you gotta love it. You gotta love the hardness and celebrate that every day, and make sure that your team loves the hardness and that they know that you love them, and you're running towards a common vision that everyone celebrates and is a part of and really embraces, because the hardness is never gonna end, so you gotta just celebrate along the way. So that's it. Does anyone have any questions? I know it's the end of the day, so we might all just want to leave and run out the door.
Here, I don't know if this is working. Can you hear me? Everyone hear me? Okay, so come up to the mic if you have a question, or you can shout it and you can repeat it, whatever's more comfortable.
Yeah. So I think it for me, it starts with me developing them and working with the leadership team to make sure that we're all sort of developing them together, even if it comes from a vision. And then I have meetings with the leaders of each of the departments to say, here's what we're thinking around OKRs. What do you think? This is the ultimate goal. Do these OKRs actually capture us getting there? And oftentimes they'll have little tunes and tweaks. And then I let them share that with their team so that all the teams have heard it from either me or a layer below me. And then we talk about it once a week in an all hands and once a month. And so once a week, every morning, we all come in and we say, all right, let's remind ourselves in our OKRs where we are, what we want to do, and then each of the teams sort of present where they are in that process. And then once a month, we'll talk about where we were, where we are, where we're going, and it all circles back to the OKRs. But we just build them in a Google Doc and kind of share them that way.
All right, we've got another question right here.
Okay, great talk, and I hope that when you go to Stanford, you make the point about I'm not Stanford, and when you go to Harvard, you make the point and you tailor your talk, because I think a lot of people could use that, knowing all the people I do from these places. So my question is, you've been successful in this application, if you will, the women's styling. It seems to me very clearly, very early in your talk, hey, this could apply in a lot of other domains. Have you been thinking about that? Any thoughts, comments on that? You must be.
Could StyleSeat work for other verticals and other industries? Yeah. It definitely could. If we win in the beauty industry, we're a multi-billion-dollar company. If we do what we want to do in this industry alone, we've done some cool stuff. So I'm keeping my blinders on and focused on that. But yeah, it could totally work in a lot of other industries.
Okay, we got another question back here.
Hi, it was a great talk. I'm Daniel Sauerborn from Prayer Spark. And I had a question for you about when you were starting off, you had said you were a little bit self-deprecating, saying you didn't have the education that you thought you might need. What about the technical aspects of starting StyleSeat? Did you have an app? Were you creating an app? Was Dan your co-founder? Was he part of developing the technology? How'd you do that part of it?
So I had a product position at a startup before I joined, a startup of like 6 people. So I was like the PR person and the product person and the marketing person and the janitor and all that stuff. But I'd worked with and helped build the product with the engineers. So I'd worked that process before. And then after that, I worked at Current TV, where I led their digital distribution department. So I owned a P&L and a product line. And we were in charge of growing and making money for the company. That's where I met Dan, who was the first engineer there. So it was a television network that no one watched that was started by Al Gore. It was really cool, but it was I know, we're so lucky to work with such many people. That's where I met Dan. And so I think what's important is to really know your strengths and weaknesses. I knew I wasn't an engineer, right? So I needed to have an amazing person who could own that piece of the business that I trusted. Because I think where the challenge comes is if you're not an engineer and then you work with people that don't give you the context enough in the creation of the code and the architecture, so you can't make the decisions that you want to make as a company, and you can't call them on their, I'm trying not to curse, I'm sorry, you can't call them on their stuff because you don't have that context. So because I had Dan, he's this amazing hacker, he's the smartest developer I've ever met, and he and I are, 6 years later, we're still extraordinarily good friends and business partners. Like, that helped. So finding Dan was amazing, and we had already worked together.
All right. I think we can do one more question. One or two. Does anybody have any on this side? I've been kind of hogging the mic over on the right side here.
It's hard to compete with happy hour after this, right?
Well, we've still got one more session.
Oh, okay,
but-
no,
yeah, so
no
you're
happy
good.
hour.
But you're right about the happy hour.
Hi, thanks. This is great. And you, as he said, mentioned that you have no place, in being in business, which obviously is not true, but I feel like many of us feel that way.
Yeah.
However, you also said you live in Excel. And I wonder, was that a change, or was that something you took from your previous job doing at Current, or is that something you just kind of had to learn?
Yeah, well, I also built our P&L for the company for the first 4 years of the business. So we raised $40 million, and I was head of finance, which is crazy because I have no finance background. But you just teach yourself as you go. And what that means is, like, I worked with finance people. I built the first version. They said, do this, do that, to the model. I work with the model every single day. I don't recommend that necessarily. Sometimes it's not the best use of your time. But for me, it was really important if I was going to run this business for me to know every single in and out, where all the dollars going, where are we spending everything, where is growth coming from, and why. And when we get more information, let me go in and tweak the model, because that is important for me to know, to understand, to make decisions for this company. And again, that's not for everyone, but I just sort of taught myself and then lived and breathed it, and now we have an amazing person that runs it, and she does it so much better than I do, but I call her on every single little mistake in it, and I'm really thankful that I can do that because I'm crazy. But like, I'll pop open at 2 a.m. and, in the morning, in the middle of the night, and say, like, what if we did this? And I'll mess with the model, and my boyfriend will be like, what are you doing? That's crazy. But like, that's how I have to process the information. It's how I think about ideas. So for me, that I just taught myself and did it.
So crazy in a good way. Crazy in a good way. Anybody else? One more question? Any other questions? Over here. Okay. Actually, two more, and then we're out here.
Philip Bennett, Startup Idaho. So when did you realize
My parents
that
live
you...
in Idaho.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Idaho's a great place.
Yeah.
Everybody should live. Well, no, maybe not. No. Anyway, when did you realize that you wanted to be an entrepreneur? How long did it take you to have the confidence to do it? And did somebody help you develop the confidence to do it?
I didn't know what entrepreneurship meant because I didn't go to school for it. It didn't exist. I was a French major and a political science major. There's no business major at the school that I went to. I didn't think I could work in the tech. I love the tech industry. I've worked with computers. I love computer games. I'm like, love them. All my friends were developers, but because I wasn't one, I didn't think that was an option for me. I moved to San Francisco and just started hanging out with people that were all founders or obsessed with it or worked at startups. And all we would do is talk about fundraising and MVP and hiring and all this stuff. And it was the first thing that I ever really cared about in life. But it wasn't a couple years later until I got the courage to do it. And my first advisor was Garrett Camp, who started Uber, and then my second one was Travis Kalanick, who runs Uber. So that certainly didn't hurt. But both of them were the first people in my life that were like, who cares about all this engineer, Stanford, Harvard? Like, you should be doing this. And both of them actually wrote me my very first checks. Travis helped me on AngelList. Actually, I raised the first seed round, helped me do that. So I had advisors are so incredibly important in the process, just to even give you the confidence and like help you do it. So find those people.
All right. We got one more right here.
Thank you so much. Excellent talk. Elias from Anywhere. I'm wondering if you could take us back to your early stages when you launched and the time from when you launched until you felt like you reached product market fit. And so if you could tell us a little bit about your struggles, like did it take you a long time? Did you reach any pitfalls? And did you get to a point where you didn't think that this was going to be a viable business?
Yeah.
If you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I found my first engineer on Craigslist. I was like, Garrett, how do you find an engineer? I don't really know any that don't have a job right now. And he was like, Craigslist? So I wrote an ad, and someone replied, and he was this guy who had made a fortune from Google and wasn't working anymore and was like, I'm kind of bored. So yeah, I'll build your MVP for you, which is crazy and amazing. And so he built the first version of StyleSeat for me. That's how I was able to show that to Dan and say, look how this works. And he was like, oh, I could do that way better. But he wanted to join the company. And so that's how I connected with him, as he and I were really close. But it wasn't until I already had a design and a version of the product that he was like, okay, this is something that I would love to do. Engineers are really visual. They like to think and see how something works. And then we basically worked out of Tyler, my first engineer's house, for the first year and a half. The first version of the product, I wanted to build this marketplace, but we had to really be super disciplined about MVP. And so our MVP was client tracking for a stylist. So I found that a lot of stylists were using 3x5 cards to track their clients or not tracking them at all. And CRM is their entire business, but not one stylist I talked to knew what that was. So giving them a really simple app to track your clients, track their formula history, take photos and track their history of services that they've gotten was super useful for stylists. And that was the first feature that when we built it, one stylist would tell every stylist in the salon, and then all of a sudden we had several salons using it, and then all of a sudden we had people all over the country using it. And it was, then we started to build more and more business tools, and it wasn't until we were powering hundreds of thousands of dollars a month in appointments that we raised our first capital. But that allowed us, with all that traction, to get investors to get excited about it.
All right. Thank you